Well, we should probably give this all a go. See if we can get it working. Oh, it's all going a bit funny. It's all going a bit funny. Have we got it? Have we got it? What's happening here? There's a lot of things happening all at once. And it doesn't appear to want to play. What is going on? Now I'm assuming that you can all hear me, but you can't see my face at the moment, which is a little bit irritating. So if you bear with me a moment, we're just working out how we get that to work. Haha. Well, let's see if this will work. Because it's all pulling through everything at the same time. So, we're going to spoil everything right off the bat, it appears. And we're going to let him in. This is all the technology going wrong all at once, everybody. So let's hope that this all works. But there he is. Hi, everyone. We're going to start with him because we can do. We're also going to slightly see if I can try and get this looking a little bit better than it did. Can I put myself somewhat more in the middle of this? I can. And now Joe's disappeared. We're learning as we go. There you go. Now the question is, can people hear us? Can you hear me? Oh, hang on. There we go.
Hear you.
There you go. And I'll press that button and then I think people can hear you too. I think that'll probably work.
Let's hope so.
If you're in the chat, can you say hello quickly? Just poke your head above the parapet and just see whether any of this works. Because then the other thing I'm going to do is I am going to press that button, because then we fill up the entire screen and people can't see the buttons. Is the hope. Oh, it's all guesswork, Joe, and it's all going wrong. It's all guesswork and it's all going wrong. So if you're joining us right at the beginning...
It's a wonderful thing when it works.
It is, isn't it, just? If you're joining us right at the beginning of the stream and you can hear us, please put something in the chat, because we need to make sure that this is working. It'd be really helpful. I'm just pulling up the stream on my phone very quickly, just to see. Yes, it does appear that something is happening. We have noise. It does, yes. Hello, everyone. In which case, you can see our special guest already. So we'll get going. And apologies it's lagging slightly, but we'll see how this goes. Guys, gals, and the gender fluid, all beyond the binary, welcome back. It is Wednesday night. It is 8 PM, and welcome to the BOTW What's Current stream. My name is Anthony Russell, and I'm joined by EIHA statistician Joe Scutts. And for a little bit, Joe's going to join me as we walk you through the many wonderful machinations of everything that's happening in the National Ice Hockey League structure. We focus on the National Division, especially him, because he commentates in it. But we will, of course, walk you through everything from the National Division as well as Division 1 and Division 2 in the North and in the South. Boy, oh boy, that getting the technology to work for this has been very, very wonky. But it's here. Hello, Joe.
Oh yeah, how are you?
We've got it to work. Guesswork. 90% of how I do my day job, says Chris Beale in the chat, which is always mildly promising, if nothing else. If this works, folks, then great. If not, then it doesn't work. But before Joe and I kick off too far, I'll do a little bit of of housekeeping as I usually do, and then we're going to crack on with this gentleman because he's got an awful lot of stuff going on right now, and he's an ideal person to talk about. But if you're watching us live on YouTube or you're watching the feed afterwards, either way, hello, nice to meet you. We're here Wednesday night, and we will be for the rest of the British hockey season to talk you through everything in the NIHL. If you are watching live, of course, you have the wonderful option of sharing out the stream. Please do that. Algorithms are how this thing all works, and it'd be wonderful to have more people watching and joining in and doing all of those fun things. And if you aren't watching live, of course, you have the chat function, which is great. You can do all your bits and pieces on there. Questions, comments, anything you want to chuck in would be massively appreciated. But of course, if you are joining in, please remember the golden rule here at BOTW. DBAD. Don't be a dick. Be respectful of other people's thoughts, feelings, and opinions as we roll along. And the other thing, of course, bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Officially 12 years old now. If it was a child, it would be in secondary school, which is a terrifying thought of how long I've been doing all of this nonsense. But thank you for all of the kind words recently for the back end of last week when the site turned 12. Boy, I feel like I've been writing forever, and then I spent the entire weekend writing, which is why I'm behind with some other bits and pieces, like why there's been no update or report from the Leeds game from the weekend. It is coming, I promise. But there's tons of stuff on there. The last 12 years worth of games that we've watched, and all our Hockey Story series, long-form content about things that goes back into the 19th century, into the present day, referees, players, crazy things left, right and centre. And also the other thing that's coming up at the back end of this week, the 2022-23 Banners on the Wall Bison Player of the Year will be announced. I'm waiting for one of my graphic artist friends to make me the tile, like the thumbnail tile for bits and pieces, but we will announce that before the Bison take on Sheffield this coming Saturday. Either way, because like I say, the technology went sideways, and I got Joe in so everything would work. So he is here. Joe Scutts, EIHA statistician, nihlstats.wordpress.com. Thanks for taking the time out, Joe.
No worries. Less of the IHA statistician. That's not been confirmed yet. I'll get in trouble.
Oh, you're not. I didn't know. I didn't know your official status at the moment. So Lord knows what you actually are. Interested other party. There we go.
I don't even know what I'm doing at the moment. That's half the problem.
Well, certainly you don't know what you're doing because you've announced that you are undertaking a massive project, which you announced on Friday evening. For those people who haven't heard of it, give us a bit of information as to what the plan is with NHL Stats over the summer.
So, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I kind of decided, well, I made a decision last month, how can I come up with a big finish to the season, because basically being the font of all stats for 5 divisions wasn't enough for me, apparently. So I decided to come up with, or see if it was possible to do a book like the old ice hockey annuals. And there hasn't been one since 2018, I think, was the last ice hockey review, or even the year before that was the last one of the, it was like a 54-year run. So the idea was, I could do something like that and combine it with a book like Baseball Prospectus and put all of the stuff that I've been tracking for the last, 4 years, 3 seasons in one place.
Yeah.
And more and more I started fiddling around with templates and stuff like that. I've worked out that, actually, hang on, this could be relatively easy kind of thing. So the idea is that it's going to be, for definite, it's going to be all 5 divisions, to paraphrase yourself, the National League, North and South, 1 and 2, do all those. I am trying to work on getting access to the WNIHL pages as well, because the WNIHL hasn't been in a book like this before, so I think it'd be a good time to start. And I like to think I've done enough work, or good work, with the NIHL stuff this year that I'd be allowed to, get the access needed for it, because, the game sheets are what I need for it. I know Mara Reynolds with Elite Prospects UK has done a lot of work with just going around and asking teams for it. Gracious enough to say that you do the Bison one for me. Chris Beale, who's in the chat, is going to be doing Stretums. I've got a few others, and I'll be spamming the absolute pants off that the next few weeks, trying to get one for every team, because it's going to be like herding cats, I think, personally. But yeah, it's going to be something massive, and obviously the big kicker is, by the time I've got this all done and made up, in September that it's going to be put out for free. I'm not going to be accepting any money for it because it's not going to be a physical book. It's going to be just like a Kindle edition kind of thing. And I didn't see it right to be charging for a book when it's not a physical copy. It's a conversation I've had with a few friends about it as well, where like I'm one of these weird people that I like buying books. You know, I will go and buy autobiographies and stuff like that, and I like having a physical copy of something in my hand. So not being able to give a physical book out to anybody just yet didn't sit right with me charging money for it. So instead, I'm going to be putting out for, like I said, I'm going to be putting out for free. There's going to be a GoFundMe page that I will set up in September when it goes live. The idea is to try and see how much money we can raise for 4 separate charities. So I did it in a case of I picked one for myself, one I picked from arguably my 2 best mates in hockey, and Ben Callahan and Tom Graham at the Wildcast, because they gave me a chance going there. The Solent Devils have picked one. Obviously, I wouldn't be in hockey without them. I wouldn't be in the position I am with NHL Stats without them as well. And the Bees Ice Hockey Club have picked the 4th one. So it's hopefully going to be raising money for Mind, which is one I picked, Macmillan Cancer Support, which is one that Ben and Tom picked, Dementia Support Hampshire Isle of Wight, which is what Solent picked for Alex Murray's late father, and Young Epilepsy, which is the Bees sort of in-house charity that they raised money for. They did it was £2,500 last month. Harvey Stead's 500th.
Yeah, I was about to say Harvey's 500th game was a young epilepsy sort of charity night into the bargain as well. A massive project, and I think probably one question I think that a lot of people I'll ask this question before we kind of start talking about some of the more today stuff, as it were. But what's the fascination with the stats? Why do it all, Joe? I think is probably one question a lot of people would probably ask.
So it's obviously hockey is essentially a numbers game. You know, when you get to the whole goals, assists, points, all of it comes down to data, like most sports do. And it would have been about 2018, about that time, when it was kind of that case of, you know, you're looking around what was then Fixtures Live and seeing that there was sort of just a gap in, you know, in where the numbers come from. Like, there wasn't that much detail in. There was no real way of tracking things like a team's special team stats. There's no way of tracking, you know, which player has the most power play goals in a season or on a team. And it kind of started like that, and it's sort of been something I've gradually built up through the years. So the first time I did it was just, you know, it was a fairly basic Excel spreadsheet, which I was doing for the Devils at the time and helping out the coaching staff when they were in NIHL 2. Just, you know, here's who you got to look out for because you're playing teams that you haven't played in 5 or 6 years. So it was just a spreadsheet. And then the year after that, I set up the Twitter account, and it was just a case of, you know, here's special team numbers for each game and who they're playing off against each other. Then, of course, it escalated to the website, which, you know, I wasn't thinking much of it. I think
Escalated, he says.
It was a niche on a niche. I didn't think it could do anything. And then this season happened, and it's like, well, hell has broken loose.
Just a small bit. A small bit.
Yeah, it's gradually built up. So this is basically my end game kind of thing. It's, you know, if I can do this, then I've completed the set, really.
The end of the Joe Scott cinematic universe. Now obviously people, if you aren't following
the Thanos this.
Yeah, if you don't follow Joe or anything that Joe does, firstly you're welcome to the stream. You must be very, very new. But yeah, NHLstats.wordpress.com, NHL Stats on Twitter. Follow Joe and what he does, and if you do check the Twitter, there's the teams on there that Joe's still looking for people to write season reviews for. The Bison is taken, thank you very much, and a few teams obviously will be taken. But Joe, you've been updating as you go with kind of the teams that kind of need people. A lot of teams, by the looks of it, in sort of in 2 North and 2 South still at the moment, by the look of it.
There's a lot of teams, but they're getting picked up now and then. It's a case of, I really have to reiterate this, it doesn't have to be someone who is an experienced writer like yourself or like Chris, because again, I know he's watching and he's done this. Ben Callahan is doing the Wildcats one. it can be anybody. I've got a couple already for the North and South Tier ones, which are current players. There's a couple of team managers are doing it. There's social media people. There's fans. There's all walks of the hockey spectrum in it. And it's just a case of, look, if you feel confident enough to be able to write me just a page on your team's season as a whole, it can be as little or as much as you like. It's going in the book, because at the end of the day, you're the person who's watched their team the most this year. There's no point me reading it. I get to see, if you're looking at South 2, I get to see 24 bits of paper that describes your team's season, and I just get to infer from that what it is. I don't get to see, how they play, who are the standout performers, kind of thing.
And also as well, the one thing I'd say is, like, I've obviously written for a very, very long time now. But if you're wanting to make the jump into having a go at doing some writing about this, whether it's about hockey or sports writing in general, have a go, because everybody starts somewhere. Everybody has to have a go at it, and what better place to have a go at having a go than a project like this that is, with all the want in the world, it's going to be read by a fair few people in this country, because it's going to be a one of a kind resource that we haven't had for a number of years now. So if you fit, so be brave. Put pen to, well, don't literally put pen to paper, because obviously that'd be somewhat more problematic to put in an electronic book. But stick your fingers on your keyboard and have a crack at it, and get in touch with Joe if there's a team in there that you think you can have a go at. Either way, one of the things that I've noticed the longer I've done this show is occasionally teams will be really, really nice and announce news just before we go live. And the one bit of news that, of course, that we do have affects NIHL 1 South, and we will have a new body behind the bench at the Riverside for 2023-2024, and Lewis Clifford will return to coaching as he is the new coach of the Chelmsford Chieftains for next year. Anthony Leone is going to obviously been doing these bits and pieces for the back end of this season since Mark Saunders was let go, but now having finished off at the end of last season with the Milton Keynes Lightning, Lewis Clifford returns to coaching and will be behind the bench at the Riverside for next year. Obviously not the most auspicious of ends. Milton Keynes, that disappointing loss in the playoff final last year, Joe, but a really experienced coach that Chelmsford are getting to step behind the bench for them for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's someone who is used to coaching at this level. Obviously, the years he spent with the Thunder was why he got given the job at the Lightning in the first place. And it's going to be interesting to see, how that year off has done for him mentally. Like I say, it was a hard season, essentially, Milton Keynes last year. I'll be interested to see what happens going into Chelmsford, obviously, with, there's been a lot of turnover. I think it was 5 guys retired last year. No, not Burger Chain. The Bartlett's also rumoured to be retiring at the end of the season. I mean, they did say at the way back in September that this was, the last dance, as it were. So whether or not he can convince them to come back is a different matter. There's a lot of nice pieces there. It's interesting to see which ones they can keep. There's people like Callum Burnett, Dan Fay, who do absolute bits in South One. Luca Tassadri is one of the best young up-and-coming netminders Britain has.
Yep.
And obviously there's forwards there that, can do bits. James Pentecost is there, and he's been one of their top point scorers all year. But there's a lot of turnover that's happened in a short space of time at Chelmsford that obviously we haven't seen really in, a decade now? Maybe more.
Club in transition, very kind of interesting as well when you think that they played Invicta last weekend in the South One Cup final, which of course congratulations to the Dynamos on winning that. But you think about that transition Invicta went through with the sort of the change in ownership and the parishes taking over the club, and the kind of the bit of a wobble that Invicta kind of went through in the last couple of years, and now it's interesting that sort of up the road a little bit, the Chelmsford are now kind of in their own transitional phase. Obviously, the Thunder have sort of been, bits and pieces moved around with the Thunder. Mark Saunders moved away from Romford, so the Junior Raiders have had a little bit of our people. There's a few teams that have been very, very steady, but there's fewer of them left than there were at the start in South One, it feels like.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams, like I said, they've made that transition. Invicta, obviously, from a couple of years ago, they're almost unrecognisable. They put a lot of emphasis in, giving the younger guys a chance, and someone like Owen Ryder in goal.
Yeah.
Compared to what I saw last year to the 2 occasions I got to see him this year when I was down at Solent, it's night and day. He's come on immensely, and obviously there's still the experienced heads there. You got Jura Hauschka, Stanislav Lashek, who are just far too good for that level still. Like completely ageless players. You've got, like I say, Romford. That transitional period has been a bit awkward, but then you have, PJ Anderson has been lights out. I think it was 26 goals this season off the top of my head in South One, and I think you've got about 6 or 7 in the National League. So there's another one off that production line. There's a few. I really like Marco Pasquale as well on the back end. He's been a nightmare every time I've seen him, be it at Solent or be it for the Bees now. I do feel for MK slightly, especially after last weekend and what happened there.
Yep.
It's a club I've got a lot of time for, but they really do struggle with just getting a team together. And when Carlon and O'Flaherty left, it was just the floodgates opened and teams started just spanking them for fun. It was I do feel for them, but it's South One has been brutal all year, just in terms of the teams at the top and the teams at the bottom. It got better obviously as the seasons wore on, with Oxford and Romford picking up wins here and there. Chelmsford and Victoria seem to be playing, I think, for the what's it going to be, 10th time now,
Yeah.
9th, 10th times this year, 4 in the league, 4 at the finals.
TJ Anderson, 23 plus 10 in 20 games, according to your site in South One.
See, there's so many numbers, I get them mixed up.
Well, you do normally have the cheat of being able to look at them.
I'm not going to say that's wrong.
Question there in the chat from Jamie, of course, regular viewer of the stream. Do you think the Thunder drop to NIHL 2 and say a Bristol or a Guildford move up to South 1?
I think in terms of the rink, obviously, Cliff took most of the Thunder side from South 1 when he was there up to the Lightning side. The rest kind of all dispersed or retired or moved on to other things. Now Cliff's going to Chelmsford. I can see people like Alex White maybe turning up there next year, and it just dwindles that pool down. And don't get me wrong, the Thunder do have some very good younger players coming through. Someone like Harry McGarvey was always impressive in the games I've seen. Samson James coming back from that freak injury in the COVID Cup is amazing. Vincent Graziano could be another brilliant netminder on the rise, but I think a drop down to South 2, it might be a case of you have to take a hit to the pride, but actually do it for the betterment of the club, because they don't get many fans there anyway for a South One game. The times I've been there's been maybe less than 50 people in the building, and obviously losing games every week, it's just going to drive the fan base further and further away. Personally, I'd like to see Haringey up in South 2. They've just put Plexi and Ali Pali. They're getting over 1,000 each week for South 2 hockey, which is insane. And they've been a solid enough franchise. And also, they took the step up for the COVID Cup. They came and faced us, Milton Keynes and Slough, in that series. And it just showed how nice a place Ali Pali is to play hockey. So I'd be interested to see if they came up to South One instead of MK. Guildford obviously will always be a name that's banded around in that sense as well. Bristol, I don't know. Obviously, you've got the team in the National League. I think it might be a little too early to move the South 2 team up. Yes, obviously they won the league, but mainly because of me, weirdly, announcing it before.
If anybody else did.
Checks for the post, Richie. But personally, I'd keep them in South 2. It's a hard one. Obviously, you don't want to move teams around too much because of the finances, and obviously, I was one of those ones. I was at the Solent Amazons WNHL game on Saturday, and obviously everyone was seeing the Streatham score go through, and obviously the usual talk of, why don't Streatham go up? Why don't Streatham go up? And me and Chris Beale have had this conversation till we're blue and sick of the teeth. Like the club, the roster absolutely could, but in terms of the club, they do not have the finances, and people need to realise it's not the club that is the problem. It's the fact that they've just got lucky and they've got an absolute god squad for that level. It's the same thing that Guildford had 2 years ago. It's the same thing that teams always have, like Victor and Chelmsford. It happens.
Yeah, I was having had a conversation with somebody. They asked me about whether Streatham would step up, and I said the thing with Streatham now is that the Streatham now is built off of the back of, almost in some ways, of off the back of the Isle of Wight having to close, because it meant Jeremy Cornish went to London, and he got Adam Carr, and Adam Carr got Michael Farn, and Michael Farn got, and this sort of where the position they're in now with Ben Painter as their head coach is you can literally draw a line back to AEW, not that AEW, the investment and property owning company AEW shutting the rink at the Isle of Wight, because without Jeremy Cornish, there's a lot of those guys who didn't end up in South London, and we don't end up with the kind of sort of Streatham powerhouse we have today, because people like to win, strangely enough, and people will take less money and they will go slightly further because they know that they can win. And the other thing as well with Streatham, of course, is that they're starting to bring through this crop of youngsters into the lineup as well. So it's not just having Vanya Antonov and Ryan Watt and Ben Painter driving up from the south. Ben Painter lives pretty close to you and I, and he's going up to South London every week. But it's the group of youngsters that are also coming through into that Streatham side. But the club infrastructure is not going to support Streatham in the national division, unfortunately.
Some of those juniors are absolutely disgusting. I got to see a few of them, obviously, from various trips. I get to watch Jack Hops on a fortnightly basis at the moment. But Preston Toombs and Emil Oxenden came down to Solent just before Christmas. Was that the game you were at with me, Anthony? I can't remember.
I think
they turned up with
It might have been, yes. The famous Bison are sick game. So I ended up in Solent. Yeah.
They turned up with 4 D men. These two played as a line the entire night and shut down, all of Solent's scoring options. And I distinctly remember going and asking Ryan Watt, how old is this kid? And he went, he's 16.
Yeah.
It's like insane. And
yes, we're old now.
Other ones on there's like Maximilian Maslak, and there's who's the other one? I can't remember. Chris is going to kill me. There's a few of them anyway.
Stick them in the chat, Chris, because I know you're still watching. And also, questions, comments, anything you want to chuck in for the pair of us, please do stick it in the chat. I've got it open, and we'll throw bits and pieces out. I've seen Ollie Nags mentioned as another Thunder prospect, and there, someone from Milton Keynes would be very useful. Fair bit of chat about the South, which is somewhat of a cheat given that we both live on the South Coast, but we probably do need to have a quick squint towards the North. If nothing else, to say congratulations to the Hull Jets, having lost out on the North 2 title to the Telford Tigers last season, but then claimed all the other trophies that were going in the North 2. It was a big game on Saturday. Telford, of course, played last week after the stream finished, which was pretty crazy. There was a game that was 9:30, then 10, then 9:30 again against the Sutton Sting that set up pretty much a winner-takes-all game last Saturday with between the Jets and the Telford Tigers too. And the Tigers could not repeat the feat. The Jets win. The Jets managed to get the result there. They've won the North. They've won North 2 for the first time. And I mean that league's been a 2-horse race for a while, Joe. When you look towards the playoffs, given that we've got Hull and Telford, Sutton and Altrincham, is there anybody that can break through in there? Can Sutton or Altrincham spring a surprise in that playoff weekend?
Obviously, in a one-game set, you can't say like no outright. Obviously, the favourites will be Hull and Telford. There's no denying that. It's, like I said, it's been a serious race for basically...
I'm laughing because there's a comment in the chat I'm going to talk about in a second.
But, Altrincham and Sutton have both gotten better as the season's gone on. I don't think the matchup for Altrincham is the one they wanted. I think, obviously, if they were given a choice between Hull and Telford, they'd have preferred Telford because their results have been better. Ironically, so was Sutton's. Obviously, Sutton, despite losing 4-0 on a night where, the game started at 9:30, it didn't finish until quarter to midnight or whatever it was, they'll take some sort of fact that they could still go and do a job there. I'm just going to go back and check my own website here and just make sure that I have got it right down. I think Sutton did take points off them this year.
I believe they did at one stage.
You've got to think that, everyone who's going there as a neutral or as a Winners fan who's going to watch the final will want to see Hull v Telford. It's by far and away the best matchup. I don't read too much into the 7-3 game. So Telford playing on the Thursday night, then having to play Saturday, and then again on the Sunday as well is insane. like that whole week was bizarre and
not ideal for anybody, really, all things considered.
no, not in the slightest. I mean, who was it? I think I was looking through the rule book earlier in the week because I was asked a question by a club about playoff eligibility. And one of the things that you have to scroll past was things like, "Oh, no midweek game shall start later than 7:30 p.m." or sorry, 8 o'clock. And it's like, that's funny. That's been discounted for this year then.
Yeah. We'll skip past that one and ignore it because of convenience. For folks sort of unaware of, if you think about NHL 2 North, that Telford Tigers played last Wednesday night and beat Sutton 4-0. They lose 7-3 to Hull in Hull on Saturday night, and then beat the Sheffield Titans by 12-2. So sorry, Sheffield, you got to face the wrath of an angry team that had just lost their league title on that
Paul
one.
Davis was 5-3 in that game.
And Paul Davis has had a pretty decent, very good year, all things considered, for Telford Tigers. What that does lead us to then is we do of course have the two Division Division 2 playoff weekends this coming weekend. Division 2 up in Widnes, Hull versus Altrincham is a 4:15 face off, and then 7:30 is Telford versus Sutton. I mean, for me personally, I think it's hard to look beyond the obvious final in North 2 at the moment. But there was, as you say, Joe, it's a puncher's chance in a one-game series.
Yeah, one game, anything can happen. I think Hull will have too much for Altrincham. Telford Sutton is the closer game, and I've got no horse in the race, but you wouldn't put it. You would love to see another game of Hull v Telford. I mean, they've beaten each other this year. They've still got the cup final.
Yeah.
One more game.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course we've got the South 2 weekend, which takes place at Alexandra Pass. Which, if you're a South 2 player, what a place to be able to kind of have a big sort of showcase event. Bristol knock off the Cardiff Fire, a 1-1 tie in the second leg down in Cardiff Bay in that one, but the Pitbulls with a 7-3 first leg win took that one 8-4. Guildford lose the second leg on the high road against the Stretton Blackhawks, but get by a score of 11-8. Which, given what happened around the league title in South 2, we probably all know what they're going for. Haringey also lose their second leg. They lose in Swindon against the Wildcats, but get through by a score of 9-5. And then Peterborough versus Invicta, which you and I have both joked about, was playing for the right to make up the numbers a little bit in that South 2 weekend, have an absolute seesaw of a battle, an 8-7 second leg result, but Invicta get through by a score of 10-9 to take their place in the South 2 weekend, which means that we get Bristol versus Invicta and Guildford versus Haringey. What a second semi-final that's going to be, Joe.
Don't quote me on this. I think in that Invicta Peterborough game, Invicta scored the last 2 goals about 5 minutes to go. They were 9-8 down going into the final death knells of that and pulled it around. That second semi-final is probably going to be worth the admission money for the Saturday alone. And that's, no detractors from Bristol Invicta. Bristol, you've got the deserving league champions, even though obviously I know a lot of fans will put an asterisk next to it in the manner they won it. But you've got to look at players. Ollie Schoen's been there, James Wood, Jamie Newton. They've all been top class this year. John Dibble in goal. Invicta, not want to be outdone by. You've got players like Jake Steadman, James Laming, Kevin Lake. All top scorers in the league. Kieran Wyatt, who is tied for most shutouts in the country with Callum Hepburn this year. They've got a chance. They've already pulled off one surprise, air quotes, 4v5. If they could go in and, basically play party people, we said it themselves. We said it. They could go there just to ruin everyone's fun. And then Guildford Haringey, which has been, it's been the matchup the last 2 years. And obviously, I think last year's final will still stick in some of those Haringey players' minds, where they got completely annihilated. They'll want to go back and look for, that wasn't us kind of thing. They'll want to go and have a go at this Guildford team. And the 2 games were ridiculously close between the sides this year. So, again, what's one more game? And then you got to look at the final, where you can make a case for any of the 4 teams winning a one-off showpiece event again.
Certainly, I think the conversation I had with a few of the Bristol players, obviously following what happened in terms of, sort of the awarding of the league title, certainly the thing I couldn't, obviously the way it ended is not the way anybody would choose to win a league title, but it was sort of a bit of a justification. Smiles for those who did the miles. If you think about some of those Bristol players who that one home game they had to play in Solihull, playing in Oxford for many years, so it was nice to see those guys kind of get their moment in the sun. Though it should be said as well, having had a chat to a few of the Guildford players about it, that there was one of, like I said last week, one of them particularly stuck in mind lost, whereas Bristol have been awarded a win against Peterborough, which sort of stuck in their craw a tiny bit, but they could rectify themselves to the point that this is what it is. But everybody in both that Bristol and that Guildford side, from what I've spoken to, they want to prove a point and they want to get through that semi-final, because a Bristol Guildford final could potentially, in the minds of a few people, either justify or really sort of put some thoughts to bed about who the best team is in that division. And Haringey and Invicta are literally turning up to just ruin everybody's day, which is just going to make for a fantastic weekend.
I think as well with that, Haringey are going to have that home advantage regardless. If they make it to that final, Ali Pali is going to be rocking.
Yes, it is going to be absolutely superb. So if you fancy some hockey this weekend and your side isn't because where it's the end of the season and you don't fancy popping along to a game that might not actually mean an awful lot, if you fancy going to witness or Ali Pali, you are going to be in for some entertainment. That is very much the nature of it. I was going to say I don't know whether you fancy sticking it out with us, Joe, because obviously we've got we've got a few divisions left to go.
I'm happy to stay around.
In which case we will not bother flashing lots and lots of scores up on the screen. We'll just have me and Joe chatting for the duration, rather than flashing between lots of different pages. If nothing else, because I don't know if the tech's going to work if I do it. So we won't accidentally handcuff ourselves. Just looking very quickly at the chats, we've got a few bits and pieces that have come in. Sheffield Titans were apparently very short benched, according to Karen. Karen, of course, who helps fuel the Tigers 2 score account on Twitter. So thank you for Karen for keeping us in the loop yesterday.
Off the top of my head, they were very short benched.
And Chris there saying that the Blackhawks versus Phoenix was a great palate cleanser following 22-0 game the night before. A game that was actually remotely close. I can't imagine what a wonderful thing that must have been after the night before. I mean, looking into South 1 last week, I mean, obviously, we'll touch on the Cup final in a minute, but those two final league games were virtually academic, and for Bristol, for Streatham to put a rugby score on another team, a lot of people obviously have had their say and said it's not good for the division. But is it an outlier of a result, or is this a fact that Milton Keynes, who have virtually nothing to play for, just got hit by the steamroller?
I've said this to a few people now. It is the perfect storm that you wouldn't have wanted when, again, there was only 2 games on the docket, so all eyes were going to be there. It was the perfect storm of Streatham being a roster that is too good for the league versus a Milton Keynes team that turned up with essentially a South 2 team, some under 18s, and a couple of rec league guys. It's like it was the gap between the 2 rosters was staggering, and that's what happens. And I said Victor Graziano could be something quality. I mean, I think it was 13 goals on 27 shots in the second period alone on Saturday. And there's just it is an outlier, and it isn't. Obviously, there was the game in January just after Carlon and O'Flaherty left, and Stratton went up there and won 12-1. Bradfield faced 107 shots that night, and it is just, it's a nightmare if you're a fan, because obviously you try and justify going to games and you see a score that's 22-0. Yes, obviously Stratton fans love it and enjoy it, and they've got every right to, but if you're an MK fan or an MK player, you go out there, you lose 22-0 and the team's going to still be rubbing it in your face. You kind of figure, well, what's the point? Why am I giving up 9 months of my year to do this?
Yeah.
Solent in Romford was another interesting one. Obviously, not many people know that. Obviously, Mark Duffy started for the Devils. He's done well in his games he's played this year. Chico sat on the bench, protecting his safety, because I know the way he works. But they were again. That's another good game. They were 3 win there. Goals for everybody. Steve Olsen, you know very well. Ryan Sutton
Ooh.
with 3 assists as well. I think in that one.
Yeah. Apologies there for dropping out for a second there, folks. I managed to try.
Janky.
We did for a second, yes. I pressed something to slightly adjust the border, and it all went sideways because, of course, it did. But yeah, so in terms of South 1 is now finished, but of course we do have cup. We have cup winners now in the form of the Invicta Dynamos with a. If you've not listened to Zero Pucks Given with Ben, the Chelmsford podcast, I mean, very sort of very honest in its assessment. Invicta dominate both games. They take the second bit of silverware of the season, as it were. But but ultimately Chelmsford just not having quite enough in the tank, it seemed. Oh dear, what's happened there? What has happened there? Are you there, Joseph?
Yeah, you've got. Sorry. It all went janky.
It all went janky again. It all went janky again. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear.
The internet. Next time I'll just come round, shall I?
Yeah, might as well actually.
Yeah, the Invicta Chelsea Cup final was. It's everything you wanted in a local. The game was really won. 4 in the third period, and you got a feel for Chelsea. They lost. Which one was it? Cameron Bartlett on the Thursday, and not many people would have noticed that he got suspended for the rest of the season, and that's already a big hit to your lineup. And you then go against an Invicta team that has had your number for the entirety of this season. Mm-hmm. It was just, again, one of those things where everything fell right at the right time. The Dynamos deserved the cup win. They played Devils off the park in the semi-finals. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that reflects in next week's, rematch again. Because
yes.
Why would you want to play different teams?
Yes. Why would you ever want to have anybody else? Because having had 2 legs and a very emotional, very draining cup final, the Invicta Dynamos and the Chelmsford Chieftains will go at it again next weekend in the South 1 playoffs. Invicta versus Chelmsford, Slough versus Romford, Solent versus Oxford, and Streatham versus Milton Keynes. I do get a little bit of a feeling that potentially Streatham are not going to put 22 goals on Milton Keynes in just the one game.
Well, I mean, the last 2 games have been, 34-1, I think is the scoreline, 34-2. It's not one that I don't think you're going to get many people going to, let's put it that way.
No.
I think that just make it interesting.
Yeah. But yes, crispy. It's gone V like you sound fine, video not so. Yeah. So sorry, folks. Trying our best with something new this evening. So apologies, it's not worked 100% brilliantly at the moment. But hopefully it'll start writing itself again in a moment. But yeah, so it's hard to look beyond. Certainly for me, I think it's hard to look beyond Streatham and Solent making that the final 4 there. But certainly Slough versus Romford. Slough versus Romford has the potential to chuck up a bit of a surprise. It's all gone janky again. I like this word janky. I need to use it more when things break, I think.
Romford have beaten the Jets a couple of times. They've won both at the Sapphire and in the Hangar this year. And the Jets team are... You're welcome. The Jets team are an enigma. They absolutely wall up in front of Brett Shepherd and Brett Massey. The defence has been brilliant all year, and it shows in the numbers. The problem is they couldn't hit opponent's backside with a banjo at times. They're trying to win every game 3-2, and at a level where you've got people like the Barnards, you've got Hauschka, you've got Lashek, you've got Antonov, you've got Watt, you've got Murray, you've got Pitts. You're not going to be able to keep every single team in the league to 2 goals, and that's been their problem for most of this year. I think they've got the third best goals against this year, but something like only the second lowest goals for this year. It's been a weird one for them, and yeah, Romford have done the job on them this year a couple of times, and if they've got everyone available and not playing for the Raiders, and I think they will have them this weekend because the Raiders don't have anything to play for.
No.
They're stuck in 6th. They're not moving up. They're not moving down. There's potential for a massive upset, and it's not like the Romford Junior Raiders have pulled an upset off in a South One quarter-final in the last couple of years.
Lovely comment from Mr. Graham in the chat there. Someone gets some more internets down to deepest, darkest Hampshire. I'm blaming the seagulls. We're too close to the water. That's my excuse for it, to be honest. But yeah. So one set of quarterfinals there, and then of course we look up to the north from last weekend, where the Nottingham Lions re-qualified for the playoffs, having qualified and then been docked points, and then qualified again thanks to Sheffield obviously coming close on.
You're welcome, Nottingham.
Yeah, Sheffield obviously coming close on Sunday. They had to beat Solihull to have a chance, and unfortunately go down by a score of 4-2 against the Barons, which, just as their game had started, made the Nottingham Lions Billingham Stars game a complete non-entity, because it meant that neither side were going anywhere in terms of their positioning. But what actually ended up being a pretty decent game all in all between Billingham and Nottingham. The Lions put a real effort in where they've struggled over the last couple of weeks. Billingham take it in overtime after the Lions missed 3 breakaways, 1 at the end of regulation, 2 in overtime itself, and just couldn't put the game away. Billingham get the extra point, but it did mean that the Lions qualified out by right, by having actually taken a point off of the Stars. What it does mean, though, is that Nottingham have the dubious honour. They get Solway again in the playoffs. Billingham will take on Blackburn. Whitley, who finished in 3rd place, not a brilliant year at all for the Warriors, who of course will lose coach David Longstaff at the end of the year. They take on the Deeside Dragons, and Solihull versus Widnes in what should be a cracking 4th versus 5th tie. After their cup final exploits, Joe, I'd be very, very surprised if we don't see a Solway Billingham North 1 final.
I think Solway Billingham is the final everyone wants. It's the final that you deserve. It's the 2 best teams in the league, but there are upsets potentials here. I'd say there's more potential upsets here than there are in South One. Deeside Whitley has the potential to be an absolute barn burner. Deeside have beaten Whitley, but then also been completely annihilated by them back at Whitley Bay. Solihull Widnes has.
That's a coin flip for me.
One of the more interesting storylines over the year, and it's something that's kind of been amongst all of the shenanigans that have happened in the last few weeks with cups and playoffs and hats and all this stuff. The thing everyone missed, and it's something that I've been trying to get fixed since January, and no one's been able to give me an answer, is the North One Cup. The North One Cup was cool the second weekend of January, with no press release or anything like that. There was one line in one article, and that came from the Widnes World, and that said that the Deeside Dragons results were expunged. And I went back through and I checked it, and at the time that it was called off, Widnes were 4th in the group. Solihull would have been 5th, but they were on the same amount of points. And it came down to a head-to-head. Solihull, however, had 3 games in hand. Widnes had 2. So it's because of it's one of those quirky things that because it never got solved, and because of all of this, mismanagement in things all year round, that this now has a bit of an extra edge because it should have been Solihull in the semi-final and not Widnes, and now again that's the whole thing of prove who's the better team, who should have been in that cup final, or at least in this case semi-final.
With all due respect to the Nottingham Lions, and they are of course the unofficial second team here of the What's Current stream, if they somehow managed to beat Solway, it would be. I think people would there'd be police investigations into match
The
fixing.
miracle on ice.
Yes, it would be one of the biggest things ever. I mean, you're staring down, like you've mentioned, Whitley versus Deeside would be a very, very good. Is going to be a very good quarterfinal series, but the most likely outcome is Billing and Whitley again in the semi-final in Altrincham on over Easter weekend. And I think that potentially is going to set up something very, very massive. And I think in some ways the problem for whoever ends up in that semi final is that if a Billing and Whitley, in fact any combination of those four, because it's hard to look past Solway going all the way to the final. But any team that's going to get through that sort of middle of the pack in terms of the other games, whether you're second, third, sixth, or seventh, you're going to have expended so much energy by the time you have to take on Solway. You're almost going to be out of puff before you begin.
Yeah, it's the potential for that Billing and Whitley game is going to be, it's going to be a battle. It's not going to be a roll over and let Billingham win. No. Local pride is on the line there as well, and that's something that obviously, they moved a game for a Carabao Cup final because they want the derby matters.
Yeah.
It's going to put online, and it's a case of who survives more gets Solway. But my problem is it's the same problem I have with South One. I can't see anybody beating the champions.
Mm. And of course, for those people who are, whichever end of the country you are, if you're not familiar with Streatham and you're not familiar with Solway, get yourself to Coventry, because that 12 p.m. face-off on Sunday, the 16th of April, is going to be an absolute classic in the making. Either way, we had our playoff weekends, our playoff quarterfinals. There is, of course, one league in the NIHL that hasn't technically finished yet, and it is the National Division. And we'd be loath, as much as many jokes I make about them, we do, of course, need to congratulate the Peterborough Phantoms, National Cup winners. Only just, but they do manage to do it. If there was a team that was going to come from a 6-0 first leg deficit to potentially win, it was going to be the Leeds Knights. And they nearly did it, Joe.
Yeah, it was a case of, we had also the whole thing with Jordan Marr before the game and Callum Hepburn coming in, and here's your debut in the National League, fella. Go on and play the second leg of a cup final. It's they're at the deep end, and like I say, that Knights team threw absolutely everything. And I was following along with the tweets from you and Phil Harrison on the Friday night, and it was just that case of maybe they didn't quite hit the ground running in the first period as they quite would have liked, and if they had gotten obviously one or two more goals in that first period, it's a completely different story, and we're talking still about potential grand slam. Instead, we've got Slava Kulikov and the Phantoms doing what Slava Kulikov and the Phantoms do best, which is playing party pooper.
I think the one thing actually I thought about it was the thing that the Phantoms did really well, and obviously Leeds got a couple of late goals, but they managed the third period really, really well, and sort of accepting the fact that Leeds are always going to score. You can't stop Leeds from scoring. So what you need to do is you need to limit their scoring, and I think that's probably the one thing I thought that Peterborough did really, really well. If you think about that sixth goal for the Knights that comes from Kieran Brown, it comes with about 20 or so seconds left. If they score that with about a minute to go, I'd have feared for Peterborough. But they held them out to the very, very last moment before Peterborough end up getting that empty net goal from Austin Mitchell-King, who I personally thought, having watched it live, I was a little worried that he jumped into the boards a bit too early, as it looked like he was about to Superman himself face first into the Leeds plexi. I don't know if people have had a chance to see the highlights from the Knights YouTube channel. Mitchell-King, does all the right things there, gets the puck out, gets it away, gets it into the net, and then literally looks like he's trying to leap off of the ice into the Phantoms fans, and I was genuinely concerned he was about to break his own neck in celebration. But fortunately he didn't. But certainly I think a testament to this Knights side. They've been deservedly champions, and the fact that they even came within a whisker of being able to do it is It's just testament to just how ridiculous this side is. The youngest side in the division on average, the Knights, and they've made a cup final, come back from 6-0 down to only narrowly lose, and have stormed away with the National Division title.
Yeah, they're an obscene roster. I mean, I only got to see them the one time, and that was a few weeks ago with Tom, who's in the chat. And even at sort of, 80% full power, they're still cruising around and making it just look so easy. I mean, players like Kieran Brown, Matt Haywood, Cole Shudra, shouldn't be at this level. If only there was a league higher that they could go play in that valued Brits. But, the fact that you can sit there and watch them at full flight and just make it look so effortless is a joy. And they've been nothing but amazing all season.
And it should be said as well, and like I said, I haven't had an opportunity to sort of finish properly doing a write up for the Bison and Leeds this weekend. Finn Braden has been an absolute superstar for the Billingham Stars in North One. He was put on with Matt Howlett out of the lineup in Basingstoke on Saturday. He was on the line with Finn Braden with Kieran Brown and Matt Haywood. This kid is the business, Joe. He's going to start dominating at this level before too long.
Oh, yeah, no, if that's another one, well, I mean, let's face it, it's going to be inevitable that he gets snapped up by the Knights next season. It's just a case of the rich getting richer. It's bordering and obscene, and it's, back in the dark ages of a team winning the league year in and year out here for the next couple of years, methinks.
Either way, just looking back at other results over the weekend from the weekend. Basingstoke 2, Leeds 4, MK 4, Bees 3 in overtime, and the Bees again troubling Milton Keynes. Obviously, that loss to the Bees, costing Milton Keynes that last chance of the league title, and the Bees managed to take another point off them. Peterborough then had a pretty crazy Saturday, having an injury list as long as their arm. 18-year-old Joe Nolan makes his Phantoms debut in net, as the Phantoms lose 9-5 in Sheffield against the Steel Dogs. The Southwest stays red for the time being. The Swindon Wildcats with an 5-4 down at one point against the Bristol Pitbulls and win by 8-5. And then the other result from Saturday, a 5-4 overtime win for the Raiders in Telford. But with Bristol's loss, it isn't enough. The Telford Tigers are the last team to make the NIHL National Division playoffs out of that one. It feels a bit harsh on Bristol to miss out on the postseason a little bit, but I think, but certainly out of the sort of the Basingstoke, Telford, Bristol trio, you can't toss a coin three ways, Joe. But in some ways, you couldn't have argued if either of those three teams had made it in.
Yes and no. I know what you mean, and it was a case of 2 from 3 from a long while ago. Holland.
It's been about a month, yeah.
But Bristol's second half just fell off a cliff, and you look at the injury to Owen Sobchak was probably the big turning point, and then in most recent weeks they've had a load of injuries. I mean, we'll touch on it in a second. They turned up on Sunday with no Jay Warren, no Bailey Harewood, no Morgan Clark Pizzo, no Sobchak, no Burbrayer. As soon as you take 4 of your top 2 lines out, it was a real struggle. And I was doing the numbers on this for something that's hopefully going out next week. If you took the league table just for the second half of the year so far, the Pitbulls second bottom. They've won 6 games in the last 26 and only taken 15 points. It's one of those things, just the fall off. It's similar to what the Knights had last year when they had a few injuries and seemed to fall off the boil at the wrong time. And you'd like to think it's a case of, someone like Jamie Elson, who's experienced coach of this league, well, not in this league, but in this country and at this level kind of thing, will be able to sit down, assess, not make too many rash decisions in terms of team building. Just look at it logically in a case of, right, what went wrong? What can we do to fix it? And basically, it was a case of too many injuries at the wrong time. It was the same issue the Bees had at the start of the year of too many injuries, too many suspensions at the start of the year, and you're having to claw your way back from there. And Bristol had it at the end of the year, and I feel for them.
certainly the sort of great amount of effort, and I think certainly the thing I've said about Bristol a lot over the course of this season, they're a fun team to watch. From even when you take off any sort of spectacles of your team wanting your team to win a game. Bristol play some attractive hockey when they're at full strength. They're a good, exciting young team. The only team younger than Bristol in terms of its average age is Leeds, and there's a lot of exciting things kind of going on there. And for a team to miss the playoffs and still be selling out games at this point, you'd hope that the future is promising for next year in Bristol, and they've got a platform to kind of build on now. Obviously, Hull have come into the league as well. They have not had as successful a season. The first team eliminated from playoff contention, but they feel like that. But both teams new to the division this year feel like they've got a stable enough foundation to kind of make some gains next year.
The important thing that both those clubs have is, like you said, they've got fan bases. Bristol, all right, we'll say sellouts. They've been doing this trick for the last 2 seasons. They're sellouts. There's loads of empty seats everywhere. I'm just putting that as well. But they get a load of fans in Hull. Yeah. It's always been a hockey town for it.
Yeah.
And the product on the ice, simply, for Bristol at the start of the year, the product was brilliant. The team played well and were amazing to watch. Yes, it fell off at the end of the season, but it's sport. Things like that happen. Hull had obviously all the issues with getting Thamar and Svek in. Then obviously all the issues with, the suspension wheel of doom firing every time. And the back end of the season, they've put in some strong performances. I mean, the 2 times I got to see them down in Slough, they were very good both nights. Jordan McLaughlin stood on his head both evenings. You get your players like Nathan Salem and Thamar, Svek, Declan Barmer, who's just a brick wall. Right, there's talent there, and it's a case of how much they build on that. They obviously had the issue with having to use a lot of younger players. Owen Bruton, obviously, even quite high on Alex Kent, Declan Jones, players like that. I'll be interested to see if they are still given that chance next year, or if they do look at, bringing in some more National League players of, more experienced at this level kind of thing.
Because I think I think one of the things I postulated at the beginning of the season was that maybe some players who are Hull based or have played in Hull before use this year as a litmus test. Will the Seahawks survive? And then potentially consider kind of going back that way. And of course, every Hull fan wants Bobby Chamberlain in a Seahawks uniform for next year. I don't personally think that's going to happen in the immediacy, but I do wonder whether Bristol.
Pay him in chip spice.
What? Sorry.
Pay him in chip spice.
Pay him in chip spice, yes. But certainly I think where Bristol are a bit of a different entity, because the club has obviously been around for a while and has put a team into the national division. I think Bristol were a bit more of a known entity in that sense, and players, sort of certainly some of these younger guys knew that Jamie Elson was going to give him a shot. Matty Davis has never coached before at this level, and Hull was sort of coming back from the dead, and I think a lot of people will have seen that maybe it wasn't brilliant this year for Hull, but they put up a good fight and they put in some very, very good performances. I think there's going to be it's going to be easier for Matty Davis to attract players to the world's most versatile arena come September. Looking at the results then from Sunday, and we'll touch on the obvious one for you momentarily. Leeds pick up the league title trophy as they beat Basingstoke by 6-2. Peterborough win 5-4 against Telford. Raiders with a 4-3 overtime win against Sheffield. Milton Keynes beat the Seahawks in Hull by 5-3, and a 3-2 overtime win for the Bees over the Bristol Pitbulls. Dominic Gabai with the overtime winner. You commentated on Sunday's Fun and Games. How has it been watching hockey at the hangar from that position for the year?
I'm going to choose my words carefully for this. From the position I get to watch games at the hangar, it has been awful. That rink was not designed by any person who has ever stepped foot in an ice rink before. It is the worst. So if you ever listen to my commentary or watch the highlights on the Bees YouTube, if there is a reason why I'm going, I think that's because you cannot see the numbers at the other end of the ice. Some of the shirt designs this year haven't helped. I remember the first the first league game with Basingstoke when they had the misprinted road jerseys.
Yes.
And I messaged you and it was like, "What is going on? I can't see numbers."
Oops.
And it's like, don't get me wrong, the experience of commentating at this level, it's again much like writing a book. It's something I never thought I'd ever get the chance to do, especially after the COVID stuff. I kind of came to peace with it, so I got very lucky that Dan Weller Evans pops up and asks, what you're doing this year, kind of thing, and offered me the opportunity. It's been quite weird having to go into a new club and explain who I am to people as well. No one knew who I was. No one knew I'd worked for another team before. They my producer Nick, who is and has the patience of a saint, really has to put up with my nonsense every week. Didn't realise I wasn't a professional commentator until the start of March. It's like, no, I'm just a professionally trained idiot.
Yeah. Enthusiastic is what I am. I'm enthusiastic.
Both amazing. Yeah, professionally trained idiot. But no, the B season doing commentary has been amazing, and obviously the back end of the year has seen performances skyrocket, and they've already been gracious enough to let me come back next year, and I'm allowed to do my own thing with that. So I'm allowed to bring co-commentators on board, which two of them are definitely watching. I might watch it back later. So I've got loads of opportunities for it next.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. So, I mean, we won't worry too much about the playoffs. There's obviously a few things in the National Division still to be shaken out. Will Milton Keynes or Peterborough finish second? Will Basingstoke or Telford finish seventh? Though we do know that the 8 teams that, of course, will be there. Certainly the one conversation that's been on a lot of people's minds when it comes to the National Division is a team going to potentially step up and make it a 12-team league? I know Sigala, who is Swindon fan who regularly comments on the stream, and this was a question from earlier on. Do you see any team moving up to the national next season, whether it's Solway or not, and if not next year, when? Certainly from my perspective, I think that my understanding is that the feelers have gone out to the Solway Sharks about joining the national division. Whether it happens in September or not, I do not know. I think is the thing I would say about that one. From your perspective, Joe, I mean, are there any? Solway are the obvious mention, but are there any other teams that you think potentially have the ability, the infrastructure, the want to step into the national?
Oh, of course he's thrown me under this bus because I know the other team that applied.
Yeah.
I would love it to be Solway. It needs another northern team, and that's going to sound incredibly biased, but I will explain it later and possibly get myself into trouble.
I think there's no need to explain it and get into trouble. The player pool in the south for National Division hockey is if you add another southern team, will be too small. It's that simple. They're not going to let another team from the south in because there isn't enough players in the south.
And there is the team in the south that did apply. Their entire game plan was doing it with zero budget, and that would have just created a disaster. It goes back. If you're coming in with no budget, how are you going to pay players? It's a nightmare. Solway would be brilliant. I would love it. It would be brilliant if they plan it properly. And I don't mean Solway plan it properly. I mean the league. Conferences is obviously what they want to go back to. It's going to create an absolute war over which team goes in the north, be it Peterborough or Milton Keynes, and I'm all for it because I won't have to deal with it. And when it comes to playing games against the Sharks, please, whoever does the fixtures, and I know who it is, and I want to know if they're listening, but just use your head. If you don't want to travel all the way up to Dumfries twice a year, just make it a weekend trip for all the southern teams. Send them up there, play the Saturday and Sunday there, and then vice versa the other way. It doesn't take a genius to work this out.
And if it's from a Basingstoke perspective, please have our Saturday game on a day Queen of the South are at home. I want to do both in a day, please. That'd be really appreciated.
Ditto, please. Yeah, I'll take that one as well.
I mean, certainly, I do have to laugh because someone has put this in the chat. All this chat on regarding commentary. Anthony hasn't mentioned wanting to do commentary once. Hi, Kev. I've been throwing that out there because I know you lot from Drop the Puck do occasionally tune in. I've been saying for weeks, Joe, that I want to commentate on Solway versus Streatham. I'm not fussed about the national games. I want the North One final because I just want to geek out for 60 minutes of hockey.
That's all right. I didn't even get accreditation for commentary.
Which is bizarre, of course, but I will mention it very, very briefly. I will be in Coventry. I will be doing my usual bits and pieces. I will be floating around. So a couple of things. One, say hello if you see me. I promise I'm nice. But my usual thing about complaints still stands. If you buy me a beer or a cup of tea, you get 5 minutes to say whatever you'd like. In terms of what you'll get out of Banners on the Wall from the Coventry weekend, it's going to be a bit of a mishmash. My plan is to kind of do bits on the Saturday morning and the Sunday morning from my base in Coventry. Kind of will be sort of a bit, sort of previewy and wrapping up for the Saturday on the Sunday morning and that thing. And then of course, trying to do what I usually do. The Wi-Fi in the Sky Dome is non-existent, and the and doing other bits and pieces is quite hard. I basically just don't want to walk around lugging my laptop about an awful lot. So what I will be doing is kind of similar to what happened last year. Lots of interviews, trying to speak to as many people as physically possible. Stuff will be going out on the Twitter. So if you don't have a Twitter, and I understand it is a bit of a pain in the bum, but maybe keep an eye on @BannersOTW on Twitter, because every link that kind of goes up on there will link back to kind of the Spreaker site that I use when I kind of put out audio content. And you can at least pick up the links and kind of listen to things that are there. The joy of having a media pass does mean that I can at least get in front of people, and most people will, at least if they see you got a media pass, at least bother to speak to you. We spoke to some really, really good folk last year, whether it was Lewis Bell, Greg Wood, I managed to sort of grab a few people left, right and centre. What I won't be doing is I will not be doing a What's Current stream from outside the windmill in the dark. That was fun last year and a bit of a laugh to do. But I think what we will probably do is leave Saturday night and have a bit of a recap on the Sunday morning ahead of the Solway Streatham game. It's probably how I'm gonna approach that one this year. I will leave the windmill strictly for drinking, and possibly a pork pie is probably how we're going to go about that one. 3 groups of 4, then MK Peterborough debate doesn't happen. 3 conferences, Joe. I don't think the owners go for that myself.
I can't see that happening, because then it's just a case of we're playing the same teams over and over and over again. You get the Chelmsford Invictus thing. You're going to be playing, I'm going to be seeing the Bison Bees 12 times at that point.
If I buy you a beer and a cup of tea, do I get 10 minutes? No, Tom, because I know you too well. You can just buy me a beer and a cup of tea and be glad of my company.
Tom, if you buy him a beer and a cup of tea, you have to pick one to throw over him.
Ooh.
Your choice.
Throw the beer. I'll get more mileage out of a cup of tea, to be perfectly honest. Either way, it is of course the last weekend of the regular season in the National Division. This upcoming weekend. So just to have we will very, very quickly. He says quickly clicking on bits and pieces on his phone, because trying to do too much on his computer has sent his computer into a fat wobble this evening, as we've all learned. However, have we enjoyed the experiment? It's a bit different. I don't think we'll do this every week, because obviously some of that visual aspect that we've had on stream since sort of starting this has obviously been quite good. However, I think this has worked all right. It's been a bit different. Having a guest on once every so often, especially a guest of this calibre who knows what he's talking about, makes a nice change from this place. Either way, this upcoming weekend, then the last
might legitimately be the nicest thing you've ever said about me.
Otherwise, the weekend fixtures in the National Ice Hockey League National Division, the final weekend of the regular season. I assume this Friday game is still on, Joe, and nothing has changed.
No, that one is on.
No,
so I can't remember. I forgot the face. I think we updated the face off.
No, it's 7 p.m. You've even got it on there. Friday the 31st of March, 7 p.m. The Raiders take on the Bees at Sapphire Ice and Leisure in Romford, which then leads us on to Saturday the 1st of April. Only a Fool's Day if you miss your hockey, folks. 5:30 p.m. at the world's most versatile arena for the. I've managed to press a button and skip out of it. That was really clever, Anthony. Well done. But it's 5:30 p.m. in Hull for the Seahawks. And for pity's sake, all the buttons have gone wrong. We're doing so well. It was going really well there for a minute, and then just all went completely south right at the very end. Dear. It wouldn't be me if something didn't go slightly awry, I think, all things considered. But yeah, 5:30 for the Seahawks versus the Tigers. 6:30 p.m. face-off in Basingstoke for the Bison against the Sheffield Steel Dogs, and then and also a 6:30 p.m. face-off over in Swindon for the Wildcats against the Raiders. 7 p.m. for MK versus the Knights. What could have been a potential title decider, but now isn't. And then Bristol take on Peterborough at 7 p.m. over in BS10. And then the last day of the regular season, Sunday, the 2nd of April. Apologies as I cough myself into oblivion. 5 p.m. You will see the man in the box in the box on the screen. He will likely be commentating on the Bees versus the Swindon Wildcats from the hangar. 5:15 p.m. is the Leeds Knights and the MK Lightning from the Castle. 5:30 p.m. for Peterborough versus Hull. An early face-off in Sheffield because that's what they do, and I really like these 4:30 p.m. face-offs. Steel Dogs and Bison, and then the last game of the regular season faces off at 6 p.m. in Shropshire. Telford take on Bristol, and that will bring to a close the regular season across all of the NIHL national divisions. We will have 2 playoff winners by the end of this weekend as well in North 2 and South 2, and we'll have playoff finalists across Division 1 as well. Plenty of hockey to be played this upcoming weekend and lots of exciting stuff. As we get to the end of the show, Joe, what I would normally do is I will say last call to folk for questions and comments, anything else they want to chuck in. Do it from Wagamamas instead. I did that. I did do that one year. Yeah, I'm not going to do that again, I don't think. I'm just going to enjoy my evening. I miss the windmill, says Peter Bradbury. Of course he does. Well, come then, Pete. There's the answer to that question. Folks have apparently enjoyed it. Likely just under 4,500 people watched the games between MK and Leeds this weekend. Legends like MK celebrating 20 years of the Lightning. If you've not had the opportunity to read Mike Wallace's piece on the Lightning website, do go check that out. I know he was a bit nervous about it, but it's come out very, very well. Mike, so congratulations on that front. But yeah, lots of MK legends in the building this coming weekend as well. I'm sure they will all be very, very warmly received. I'm sure Leeds fans will be perfectly respectful and not mention them winning the league title once. Might not happen on that front. But yeah, last call for questions and comments, everybody, because we've obviously run a bit long. Joe, whilst people are chucking anything extra into the chat, where can they find you? What are you doing? What things do you need to plug?
Right, well, I'll go for everything. Sunday, as Andy said, Bees v Swindon Wildcats, 5 o'clock face-off. You can either come to Slough and watch it for the terrible sightlines, or you can sit at home, watch it on stream where you have my dulcet tones, along with Tom Graham, who is stepping back in to do co-commentary with me, and is promised to not be biased whatsoever. Let's see how long that lasts. At NHL Stats on Twitter, NHL Stats on Facebook, NHLstats.wordpress.com for literally everything for all 5 major leagues this year. The only place you can find it, as well as Elite Prospects when Mara has time to update it, bless them. But hit me up there. NHL Stats the Annual coming in September. Please, 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 if you are either a fan, player, media person, the manager, or you know someone who is, for any of the teams in the National, North 1, North 2, South 1, South 2, and I haven't got a contributor for it, please do get in touch about writing a season review. It can be as little or as much as you like. There is no word limit. There is no real fixed deadline. If you want to get it done in June, you can get it done in June. Obviously, I put it out now so that, it'd be fresh in people's minds. There's a load of volunteers already here. In time that we've been alive, I've got the volunteers for the whole Seahawks and the whole Jets lined up. So whatever you want to do, let's be part of something special. And if you're listening to this, follow the account. When it goes live in September in the book, we're raising money for 4 different charities. We want to raise as much money as possible. And if we raise something stupid, if we raise enough money that's a stupid amount, I'll do something stupid. Let's put it that way.
I don't think we can say much better than that. I think, a few people saying that they can't wait for commentary. Well, you do not have long to wait. After 12 years of doing this nonsense, thank you very much to everybody for their support and for their kind words over the last week. I don't know how I've kept going, but for some reason I have, and I'm very, very grateful that everybody has stuck along for the ride.